Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Professor, and today you and I will be going on an amazing journey through the French and Indian War. We will go to such wonderful places as Quebec, Montreal, Fort Ticonderoga, and many, many more. I do hope you're ready. I hope you're ready for some fun, excitement, and learning. Shall we begin? Now, many, many students will ask, who's involved in the French and Indian War? Well, the name might be a little tricky because you might think it is just a guess about the French and the, well, Indians or Native Americans. Oh, in so many ways, you would be so correct. On one side of this war, yes, it is true, we do have the French and their Native American allies. They would have been allied with such groups as the Algonquins, the Mohawks, the Ottawa, and the Shawnee. Now, it isn't just the French and their allies who are in this war. That would make no sense. Why would you be at war with your allies? Oh, dear me. On the other side, we do have the British and their Native American allies. They would have been allied with such groups as the Iroquois Confederacy, the Cherokee, Ottawa. Now, as these two groups will go to battle and will go to war, there's a much larger picture, which, well, I do hope we get a chance to discuss some. But please be careful when you're asked questions like, who was in the French and Indian War? Remember, it is the French and the British, both with Native American allies. Also, don't forget that, well, the British are the colonists. The colonists are British. The colonists are not Americans at this point. No, no, no. That won't happen for another decade and a half or so. Yeah. I'm not saying that some kind of question like that would ever be on a test. But if it were, please again, just remember it is the French and their native allies, and the British and their native allies. Now, now that we know who was involved in the war, we can now find out when did this amazing battles and wars and oh gosh, so much fun. When did it all happen? It happened from 1754 to 1763. Oh, yes. What an amazing 9 years that would be. So amazing. They called it the 7 Years' War as well. I know, I know. It's amazing that I don't know where the other 2 years went. No one really does. Yeah. Actually, this war has lots of different names. Uh, some places it's called the Pomeranian War. It's also again called the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. Oh, so many names, so little time. Well, where did this part of the war happen? Well, in the British territory in North America and in what was called New France. So I'm sure you've seen maps or discussed where these different areas were. But in case you haven't, you'll get to work on one here in just a moment. But the British territory would have been places like the 13 colonies, um, and some other parts, but those are the primary areas. As far as New France is concerned, New France was places like the Ohio River Valley, Mississippi River, oh, places like this. There we go. Now, there's that map I was telling you about. Now, what you do need to do at this point is make sure you do have some kind of a, hopefully you've got your colored pencils, and you need to go ahead and use this map right here that you see up on the screen as your guide to color the map that's in your note. Okay, and what you need to do is to either label it or you could use different colors Either one will do. Hopefully you do have some colors though, because it does look a lot prettier when you do that. Okay. But you'll see here, there's a map that lines up with the map that you have on your screen. So take a few moments and go ahead and get it colored in. You don't have to worry about all the places where it's the cities and everything, but just again, get it colored in. The green there on this map is for the British. And then we have some blue sections, which would be New Spain or the Spanish territory. And then, of course, the big, huge yellow section, that would be, well, that's all the French territory. Yes, yes. Yes. The French territory was quite large in this area. British area, not so much. Now, this is in 1754. This is the beginning of this war. And as you'll see here in just a few moments, this map is going to look a lot different in 1763, a mere 9 years later, at the end of the 7 Years' War. Now, we are about to move on to the next slide, the next bit of your notes. If you need some additional time before moving on, go ahead, pause the video, and make sure your map does get completed, as it will be important to draw comparisons later on. So again, now would be the time to go ahead and pause the video if you need some time to go ahead and get your map colored in. Once you're done and you're ready to move on, simply hit play and we'll continue our journey together. All right. Well, now that your map is all done, let's go ahead and move on a little bit more and take a look at the main cause of the French and Indian War. Well, you see, the French and the British both claimed control over areas in North America, including places such as the Ohio River Valley, Mississippi River Basin, and the Great Lakes region. You'll see those here in your map. The section where it's both the green and the yellow on the map here, those are the areas that both countries wanted. And as is usually the case when two countries want the same piece of land, they went to war. Now, truth be told, the British government in London really didn't care a whole lot about that area there in the middle, but it was the British in the colony, who really wanted that land. So they kind of, well, they picked a fight with the French. Now, it is also important to understand, and you'll see these here in the notes, that those waterways, the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, they're important to control because, well, it has a lot to do with economic and military strength. Because, well, they didn't have cars back then, and so rivers were one of the great ways of transporting things, particularly if you're wanting to sell stuff and trade. So, if you are in the, say, let's say you are in Pennsylvania, which, remember, that's a Quaker colony started by William Penn. You had stuff to sell. You would either go east, which could be difficult because you do have the Appalachian Mountains going through here, or you could go west to the Ohio River. Unfortunately, if you're British and going to the Ohio River, you're going through French territory. That doesn't always work out real well. So the British could control it. Well, there you go. Now, as we move on, the French and Indian War, as I mentioned, is a part of a much larger war, a global war, if you will, between France and Great Britain. And as you see there, it was called the 7 Years' War. But again, it lasts for 9 years. Now, there are a number of important people that are involved in this. First of all, you have the likes of George Washington. You'll notice he has that GB next to him. That means he was part of Great Britain. Again, colonies are British. This is important to remember. Then you had a man by the name of General Braddock. You have William Pitt, Major General Wolfe, General Montcalm, and then important battles would be places like Fort Necessity, Wilderness, Fort William Henry, Fort Ticonderoga, Louisbourg, and Fort Duquesne. Now, some of you had a reading related to Mr. General Braddock and George Washington. Now, at this point in time, he is not General Washington. In fact, his battle, or really terrible loss at Fort Necessity, really sets up the young George Washington to become the general we all know and love today. But at Fort Necessity, he lost bad. It was a rout. It's amazing that honestly he survived at all. But he learned lessons from that defeat that would serve him well in the years to come. Also, too, he was from Virginia. And in fact, it was the governor of Virginia who sent George out to, well, tell the French to leave. And of course, the French, they didn't want to leave. They told him, no. And George was like, you need to leave. And the French were like, no. And, well, let's just say George made a mistake in how he handled some things. And, well, the French got really upset by this. And so they whooped him pretty bad, actually. But that is a more of a story for another day and another time. So let us continue. We also have places such as Quebec and Montreal. Now, for those of you who don't remember, these are places in modern-day Canada. And in fact, they are the French-speaking portion of modern-day Canada. In the province of, that's right, you guessed it, Quebec. That is right. So again, French and Indian War was a part of the 7 Years' War, which was, as some historians will tell you, was the first world war. Probably pretty accurate. It involved such people as George Washington, General Braddock, General Montcalm, places like Ticonderoga and Montreal and Wilderness, some of which you'll hear about again when you learn about the American Revolution. Now, we have ourselves here another map. Now, this map covers what things looked like in 1763. Now, 1763, as you'll recall, is the end of the French and Indian War. It ends with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, 1763, which ends the war. Amazing how that happened. Now, it is important to note that whenever you talk about the Treaty of Paris, you want to make sure and put in the year, because there's a whole bunch of treaties of Paris which ended wars. So it's important to know that it's the Treaty of Paris, 1763. Now, you're going to have another opportunity to go ahead and color in these maps. Now, you really only need 2 colors, because at this point, all that yellow is now gone. So you're going to color in this whole section here that is green. You use whatever colors you have, that's fine. It doesn't have to be green. It could be purple. And then you have this other section of blue. You could have yellow or orange or red. Doesn't matter. It is important that you do know which color goes with which country. So for example, if you're using purple for the British, well, make sure you put that somewhere on your map. That purple is the British land now. And let's say you're using hot pink for the Spanish section. You color that section in hot pink and make sure somewhere on your map you've labeled this is Spanish territory. So go ahead and make sure you're getting that colored in. If you do need to pause the video again at this time, go ahead, but make sure you do have plenty of time to get your map colored in. And once you're done, just simply start the video again and we'll continue our amazing and wonderful journey through the French and Indian War. All right, so welcome back as we continue our journey together. Now, question is, which country lost the most territory? Well, if you compare your two maps, you can clearly see there is now only two colors where there used to be three. So the question is, whose color is gone? Well, it would be the French, of course. France lost all of its North American territory with the Treaty of Paris, 1763. Now, the effects of the war. So we did briefly mention the causes of the war. Course of the war, you'll get into more detail on that later on. And now, what are the effects or the results of the French and Indian War? First of all, as I said before, France lost its territory in North America. Now, France did hold on to a couple of small islands down in the Caribbean, but that's because they were making a ton of money down there with those, and they couldn't really afford to give those up. Great Britain, on the other hand, increased its territory in North America and even gained Florida for a little while there. Now, interestingly enough, Spain also gained some territory in there, but Spain's really becoming a smaller and smaller player um, as far as influence, so we don't usually talk about them a whole lot in the war. Now, Native Americans, they continue to fight the British. Also known as Pontiac's War. And, well, think of it this way. One day, you're fighting against the British, and your friends, the French, decide to sign a treaty with the British. But you're not really down with that. You still don't want the British to move in where you live, so you continue to fight them. Again, we call this Pontiac's War. Now, the British response to that, well, it was the Proclamation of 1763. It actually was a difficult situation for the British because you see, they were in a lot of debt to fight this war. And they looked at it and said, well, the colonists actually started this war, got their butts handed to them anytime they would fight. And, well, we had to step in and it cost a lot of money and a lot of debt. Well, leads to things like what's called the Sugar Act, which I know you'll get into later on. But the Proclamation of 1763 said that, well, there's going to be this line, which is where all of our territory used to end. You can't go past that, even though we claim the territory on the other side of it. Well, the colonists were pretty upset about this thing. They, well, they felt like they had fought and died to try and get this land, and now they can't even use it. And in fact, some of them had already moved in, and they were forced to leave. Now, all this folks getting all disgruntled like also leads to a whole lot more British soldiers being in the area. And this really bothers a lot of folks there in the colony. They start to realize at this point that maybe they are a little different. And so resistance begins to, what's the word, bubble up. This will eventually lead, we won't unfortunately have time to go into all the ins and outs on this, but just understand that eventually this does lead to the American Revolution. In fact, some people say that the French and Indian War is almost like a prelude to more war. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our journey today. I hope you've had a wonderful time. If you missed anything, well, you can always go back and watch parts of the video again, pause it when you need to, and get all the notes that you need. So I appreciate your time with me on our journey through the French and Indian War. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.